It was a trying 2025 for Spencer Strider. Should we expect more from him in 2026 and going forward? We'll talk about it on today's episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on social media at shorts.ball. Check out the podcast there at Locked On_Braves on X and Locked On Braves on Instagram. If you're new and you're watching on YouTube, please do me a huge favor. Hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up button, and leave me a comment down below. And if you're listening on the audio version, you can help out as well. Just leave a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Thanks so much for making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. Big shout out to all my everydayers out there. Might have a big announcement coming for you guys here in the near future, so be looking out for that. Today's episode, though, we're going to take a look at Spencer Strider, look back at 2025, which was a very trying season for him, and ahead to 2026, where I'm hopeful we could get back to the more dominant version of Spencer Strider, get into some of your comments, also some of the latest on the managerial searches happening around Major League Baseball. Might have one drawing to a conclusion here soon, and we got a little bit of offseason news to talk about as well. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. 2025 was a tough season for Spencer Strider. And you had the delayed start coming back after missing most of 2024, having the internal brace surgery, not a second full-blown Tommy John surgery. In fact, they said the UCL actually looked good when they went in there, but still major elbow surgery that cost him nearly a year of time on the field. And then after just one start, his first start back on April 16th, he missed an entire month with a hamstring injury. So it was pretty much 2 months of the season that Spencer Strider missed. And even I think a little bit worse than that is the fact you get built back up, you make that return, and then you have to sit out another month. And it's almost like you're starting from scratch all over again. So a very, very tough start to the season for Spencer Strider. You look at the overall numbers, though, in 2025, 23 games started, 125 and a third innings pitched, which now you get to the point where, he made 2 starts in 2024. He throws 125 and a third innings this year. So that's back-to-back seasons now where haven't had a lot of innings. And I think part of the equation for 2026 too, which obviously we'll get to in the second segment, is what's his pitch load going to look like in 2026? Do you take off the reins completely and let him throw 175 plus innings, which seems to kind of be that high mark for a lot of pitchers today? So that's something that will be interesting to see as the season gets going next year, which I can't wait. I'm already looking forward to 2026. But going through the rest of the season numbers in 2025 for Spencer Strider, in those 125 and a third innings, he had a 4.45 ERA, a 1.40 whip, a 261 batting average against. Neither of those numbers are very good. A 9.41 K per nine is pretty solid, but nowhere close to where Spencer Strider's been in the past. 3.66 walk per nine, not awful. 1.44 home run per nine is pretty bad, and home runs have hurt him even when in his dominant seasons with the Atlanta Braves. These are definitely not Strider-like numbers that we're used to seeing, but for reasonable for a guy who's coming off a second major elbow surgery. And I get it, and I'm probably going to keep repeating it just because I know I'll get a comment that it wasn't a full Tommy John, but it's still an elbow surgery that he had to miss a year of time for. And so those are somewhat reasonable numbers for a guy coming back from a second elbow surgery, and a guy who, once he got back, then had to miss a month for a hamstring. And we'll get into the other reasons why the numbers were low as well. But there were stretches for Spencer Strider throughout this season. For me, there was never a stretch where he looked like the previous version of Spencer Strider, but there were stretches this year where he was still a really good pitcher. From June 8th and through the end of July, he made 10 starts. He had a 3.07 ERA, a 1.18 whip. Those are very good, middle of the rotation type numbers. 210 batting average against, nearly a 30% strikeout rate, a 9.8% walk rate, and 7 quality starts out of those 10 starts that he made. That's a really good, 2-month stretch right there for Spencer Strider. And then he had a brutal 3-game stretch at the beginning of August. In those 3 games, he threw just 11 2/3 innings, 15.43 ERA, a 2.83 whip, a 475 batting average against. It's not like he was just really struggling with command. His walk rate was actually down a good bit in a good way over that stretch. But the strikeout rate was just 15%, and he was getting absolutely demolished. Like I said, it's not like it was just a bunch of walks and some home runs here or there. He was just getting hit around the ballpark over that 3-start stretch. You may not remember, maybe you do, but I'm going to remind you anyway. During that stretch, they decided to give him an extra day, allowed him to go into the lab a little bit and work on some things. And then he seemingly finished very strong. In his final 6 starts, he had a 2.50 ERA, which seems fantastic. But you look at the metrics over that's finished to the season, those 6 starts, a 1.31 whip, not awful, but certainly not great either. 246 batting average against, again, not awful. His season number was 261, so it's a lower than that, but not great. A 19.6% strikeout rate is definitely not what you're used to seeing for Spencer Strider, which is easily around the 30% mark. 10.1% walk rate is okay, but a 5.04 xFIP. So while the ERA was great, and I'm going to have my people that come in here and say, we don't care, he didn't give up runs, the starts were good, that's all that matters. And I get that. I understand that. Results on the field are what ultimately matter. But as we begin to project forward for next year, while the ERA looked great in those final 6 starts, the metrics for that continuing didn't look great. Let's take a look at the pitch mix, though, this year, because we did see a little bit of a different version of Spencer Strider. The 4-seam fastball, the biggest thing, the biggest talking point about Spencer Strider coming back from the injury and what we saw throughout the year was the 4-seam fastball velocity. And it was down nearly 2 miles per hour from where it was in 2023, at where it averaged 97.5 miles per hour. It was more in the 95 range, and there's really a lot more of 94s I felt like we saw from Spencer Strider this year. The 4-seamer had a positive run value of 8 in 2023. It was -6 this past year, with a whiff rate of just 15.3% compared to 28.7%. Now, 4-seam is not a pitch that you typically see a lot of swing and miss on, but you did on Spencer Strider's, and you do on elite fastball guys who can throw 97, 98, 99. You get a lot of 30% whiff rates on 4-seam fastballs. But for Spencer Strider, that whiff rate on his 4-seamer was nearly cut in half. That is a big difference, and it's a big reason why he wasn't nearly as good in 2025. You look at the slider, the velocity on it down about 1.5 miles per hour. Not anything too, that is a drastic difference in velocity, but you don't worry about it too much on the slider. But it did go from a positive run value of 16 in 2023 to -3 this past year. However, still was a really good pitch for him. It had a whiff rate of 48.3%. Now, that is down from the 55.3% that it was in 2023. But all that kind of factors in together. If the fastball is not as good, then the slider is not as good. The slider's not as good. The fastball is not as good. Those 2 pitches have always kind of worked hand in hand together. And when one of them is bad, it's going to make the other one bad. The curveball was a pitch that he had to start relying on more. I think especially at the end of the season in that 6-start stretch, he threw it 8.9% of the time this year. But like I said, at the end of the year, it felt like he was throwing it more in the 15% range. Batters hit just 156 against that curveball and whiffed 54% of the time that they swung at it. By run value, it graded out at his best pitch at 0. He didn't have a single pitch this year that graded had a positive run value. But the curveball was a pitch that he started to rely on and trust a little bit more. But even in that 6-start stretch, there was it might have been his last start, where he just had no control of that curveball. It was bouncing it. It was all over the place. He had no idea where it was going. So it's still a pitch that he is working on, and I think just still trying to build up confidence in. But he had to use it more down the stretch because of where the fastball was. The changeup pitch that he's always kind of had, he threw it 4.6% of the time, mostly to lefties. He only threw 2 of them to right-handed pitchers. 29% whiff rate on that pitch, but batters hit 333 against it when they did make contact. So it wasn't as effective of a pitch as you would want. But again, it's because a lot of these pitches are playing off that 4-seam fastball that he's still throwing over 50% of the time. And so if that 4-seam's not as good, if it doesn't have the velocity, it's not located well, then those other pitches aren't going to be as effective. My overall thoughts on Spencer Strider in 2025, it certainly was a different version of Spencer Strider, a less dominant version of Spencer Strider. But if you take out that awful 3-start stretch in August where it was just as bad as it can possibly be, he was still a really good pitcher this year. Not a great pitcher, not the former Spencer Strider, but he was still a really good pitcher. In 16 of 20 starts from June 8th through the end of the season, including that that dreadful 3-start stretch, he gave up 3 earned or less and went at least 5 innings. In 16 of his final 20 starts, he went at least 5 innings and gave up 3 earned or less. Now, we expect more from that from Spencer Strider. We expect him to consistently go 6, 7 innings, 2 earned or less, striking out 10 batters. That's what we've become accustomed to with Spencer Strider. But he was still a really good pitcher for the most part this year, especially if you take out, those first couple of starts where he was working his way back and you take out that rough 3-start stretch. And my overall point from this past season was I still believe, even if that velocity doesn't come back, that Spencer Strider can be a very good and a very useful pitcher in the rotation, maybe more middle of the rotation, but still a really good pitcher in any big league rotation. But what if the velocity does come back? We'll talk about that here and next. There's nothing like catching a baseball game live, the energy, the crowd, the chance to see your team in person, but actually getting tickets, that's the tough part. Queues, login screens, surprise fees, it takes all the fun out of it. That's why I use Gametime, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. Gametime is fast, easy, and backed by the Gametime guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. Gametime is the only ticket place that I use whenever I'm getting ready to go to a Braves game. I even use it to go to a college football game this year. Pretty much one of the few college football games I've been able to watch this year. And it's easy to use. It's super simple. I waited till last minute, when I got my Braves tickets to go to what was an awful game that they played, but we got great seats at a great price, and the family had a great time. And you can too when you use Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Gametime today. Thank you, as always, making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. Go check out Locked On MLB for your second listen of the day. We'll be getting caught up on everything happening around Major League Baseball and the postseason. No games on Saturday was quite the bummer, but you'll have Game 6 of the Blue Jays and Mariners on Sunday night. That one could be wrapped up, get you set up for the World Series, and they'll get you caught up on everything happening there. We'll have 4 more episodes coming your way this week here at Locked On Braves. We'll continue our recap and preview series on players from this past season. Be looking at some more pitchers. So if there's some other pitchers you want me to look at this week, let me know. Obviously, if something breaks on the managerial search or we actually get any bit of news about what the Atlanta Braves are doing or who they're interviewing, we'll discuss that. And then next week, we will really ramp up our offseason preview coverage. So that's what's coming your way this week and next week for a Locked On Braves. Spencer Strider is one of the bigger question marks, though, going into 2026. Nobody really knows what he's going to look like, what type of pitcher he is going to be. And as I go through this series that I'm doing on each player, looking back at 2025 and ahead of 2026, there's just so many players on this roster that I'm not really confident what any of them are going to look like in 2026. And that's a very scary place to be. Austin Riley could be great. He could be an MVP candidate. Or he could be a guy that hits 240, 250. The power continues to go down, or he gets hurt again. Ozzie could be a guy that hits 25, 30 home runs like we've seen in the past, or he could keep trending downward with that power coming off another hand wrist injury. Michael Harris could, finally reach that potential of an all-star level player, have a 25 season, hit 270, 280, or he could continue to trend downward to where he's unplayable. There's just so many players on this roster that I don't feel really confident what they're going to do in 2026 and beyond. And Spencer Strider might be near the top of that list because we don't know. He's coming off a second major elbow surgery. And I'm going to say it one more time. I know it wasn't full-blown Tommy John, but it still is a surgery that cost him a year. And it's going to take a lot of time for the location to come back, which we saw him struggle with. It's going to take hopefully some time for the velocity to come back. We don't know, but that's where we are with Spencer Strider. I said all throughout the regular season, though, that I am hopeful with a healthy regular offseason, because they at least went into the offseason healthy. I thought there was a point after that 3-start stretch in August where the Braves should have just shut him down for a couple of weeks to work on things and then give him 3 or 4 more starts at the end of the year so he could feel good and healthy going into the offseason. Now, they kind of did that by giving him some extra days, allowing him to work on stuff in between starts, and that helped. I'm still of the mind that it might have benefited him more just to shut him down for a couple weeks and work on those things. But either way, he at least got to go into the offseason healthy. And my hope was that with a regular healthy offseason, we'll see Spencer Strider come back in 2026 with that velocity back, hopefully with that command back, and he can look more like the Spencer Strider of the past. But that's just wishful thinking. Again, I can't definitively say that. That's just hope. Same thing I said with Austin Riley. I hope, Austin Riley, if he can get healthy again, and hopefully that this oblique abdomen injury he's been dealing with the past 2 years, you get that taken care of. Same for Sean Murphy, the injury he's been dealing with over 2 years. You get these guys who have been playing hurt for the last 2 years to actually get it taken care of, that hopefully they can come back healthy and look like their former selves. But that's all hopeful, wishful thinking. You saw the difference this past year in 97 with 98, 99 in your back pocket compared to 94, 95 with 96, 97 in your back pocket. That you saw the difference in that this year, and how you just can't be the same pitcher with it. What we really saw was you can't get away with 94 down the middle. You go back, and I know nobody wants to, you go back to that playoff start in Philly and the best postseason moment in Philly's franchise history, apparently, because it's the only video they ever show of Rhys Hoskins hitting that fastball. What was that? It was 94 right down the middle on a tired Spencer Strider, who, to their credit, they had worked him really hard in that inning. But you just can't get away with 94, 95, even 96 down the middle. You can get away with 97, 98, 99. We saw that this year. It might not seem like much, but we saw what that difference is, and you just can't get away with it. You look at his zone contact rate, it went up 8% from the previous 3 seasons. That's in large part because of what I showed you on the fastball this past year, and that the whiff rate on that four-seamer was cut in half from nearly 30% to 15%. So a lot more contact on those fastballs in the zone. And a lot of focus is on that velocity because that's what we can visually see, and we can see that velocity is down, and we can see that's why he's getting pounded more, because it's 94, it's 95, it's 96 down the middle instead of 97, 98, 99. But it wasn't just the drop in velocity, it was the location as well, which is typical for a guy coming back from a surgery like that. They always say location's the last thing to come. But his zone percentage went from 52% in 22 to 2023 to 47.6%. So not only he was throwing fewer pitches in the zone, but when he was coming in the zone, it seemed to be down the middle, or at least when it was down the middle, he was getting drilled when it was down the middle. And so that command just wasn't there for Spencer Strider this year. And again, because of the velocity, the pitches that he was throwing in the zone, the fastball, I mean, the slider, you're not typically trying to throw it for a strike. The curveball, you're not. The changeup, you're not. The fastball is the one pitch that he's trying to throw in the zone to get ahead, and it's just harder to do that when you don't have the location to put it on the edges and when you don't have the velocity to get away with it. And so, yes, it's important that he get the velocity back, but I think it's also just as important, if not more important, that he get that command back to be able to throw 95, 96 at the top of the zone instead of, middle or middle down. You can get 94, 95, 96 is still fast, but 94, 96, 95, 96 down the middle is going to get hit by major league hitters. But if you can command it at the top of the zone, if you can command it on the edges, it can still be really, really effective. That's still really good velocity. And you can still be a really good, maybe not a dominant pitcher, but you can still be a really good pitcher with 94, 96 if it's properly located. And that's one of the big issues we saw with Spencer Strider this year is not only was it a drop in velocity, but the command wasn't there for him either. And look, again, I'm hopeful that the velocity comes back and he can suddenly just throw 97, 98, 99 down the middle, and it doesn't matter because you can get away with that more. But what if he doesn't? And what if this just is the version of Spencer Strider, this guy that throws mid-90s with a good slider, a decent curveball? What if this is just Spencer Strider? Well, then he's not the ace of the staff, and he's probably not the number 2 either, and he's probably borderline number 3. That's what the metrics saw from this past year. The metrics did not love this new look Spencer Strider we saw in 2025, where they gave him a 4.92 xERA. His expected ERA from this past year was nearly 5. That's hardly even a rotation spot in the big leagues. And again, I think part of that you have to look at the nuance of Spencer Strider's season, coming back, getting hurt, sitting out a month, coming back again, and then that 3-game stretch that he had in August. Which, look, it's part of the season. You can't take it away. But this was a guy that was trying to figure things out, as the season went along this year. So why do I have so much optimism? Why am I so optimistic that Spencer Strider can still be a really good pitcher, even if that velocity doesn't come back? Because I'm very optimistic about Spencer Strider in 2026 and beyond, but that's merely a feeling and speculation that I have. I think Strider is one of the smartest minds in the game, especially when it comes to pitching, and I believe he will figure it out even if the velocity doesn't get there. I think the fact that he had to rely on the curveball more this year and the changeup to some degree, I think is just going to improve him as a pitcher going forward. He has to become more confident in those pitches, but we've really only seen Spencer Strider as a power pitcher. He's really been able to just dominate with a fastball, slider, the occasional changeup here or there, but mostly just a power pitcher. And if that's not there for him, he now knows I can go to some of these other pitches and still be successful. And he's going to have to become more of a complete pitcher, which again, I think Spencer Strider is smart enough and good enough to figure that out. And that we see that for almost all power pitchers. Justin Verlander, the extreme example, but a guy that was a power pitcher at one point in his career. The velocity, as over time diminishes, you have to figure out ways to still be able to pitch and be effective. And I think Spencer Strider is smart enough to do that. Now, he is still 26, so you hope he still has some good years in the tank of some 97s, 98s. But this is just a feeling that I believe Spencer Strider will figure this out. And I do think there is some reason to be hopeful that a regular, healthy offseason and another year removed from surgery will get him back to where he was before. Like I said, he's still just 26 years old. And look, there's not a lot of great stories and examples out there of guys having 2 full-blown Tommy Johns. That's not what Spencer Strider had. You look at Walker Buehler, a guy that a lot of us wanted this past offseason. He ended up getting dropped by the Red Sox. There's not a lot of great examples from guys having 2 full-blown Tommy John surgeries and being able to come back to their former selves. But there is Shohei Ohtani, and he didn't have 2 full-blown Tommy Johns. He had Tommy John in 2018, and then he had an internal brace surgery in 2023. And look what he's doing now. Now, Shohei Ohtani is a unicorn. I get that. But, and Shohei Ohtani's also had the luxury of working back very slowly because the Dodgers haven't really needed him all that much. And plus, he was still hitting and contributing there. So he's had the luxury of working his way back slowly. Strider hasn't necessarily had that. But still, that's the example of a guy who's had Tommy John and then had an internal brace and looks to be back and his velocity's back and all of that. But even more so than any of that, I just believe in Spencer Strider. And maybe that's my fault and my bias of being just a huge Spencer Strider fan, of being a big Braves fan. Like, I believed in Michael Soroka. There's part of me that still believes in Michael Soroka, that he's going to come back from all those Achilles injuries and still be a really good pitcher in the game. So maybe that's just my fault of Braves colored glasses as a fan of the team. But I do very much believe in Spencer Strider, that he's going to figure this out somehow to make himself be, at the very least, a very good pitcher, if not get back to that Cy Young level of pitcher we've seen in the past. All right, next I want to get to some of your comments and some offseason news, managerial updates. We'll get to all of that here next. NFL season is here and the MLB postseason, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff and first pitch with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel allows you to play the way you like with player props, building same-game parlays, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. The Blue Jays are the favorite on Sunday night. The Dodgers are obviously the heavy favorite to win the World Series, with Shohei Ohtani as the heavy favorite to win the World Series MVP ahead of Cal Raleigh and that guy named Freddie Freeman. They have player props on there as well. You can see all that at FanDuel.com. Also, make sure you visit FanDuel.com/playsafe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way you play. Are you ready now? Download the FanDuel app by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet for a chance to win $300 in bonus bets. Well, I want to get to some of your comments really quickly. I asked you about what you thought of Spencer Strider's 2025 and your outlook on him for 2026. Manlio says, it's a tough one because it's hard to split the brain and the heart. I am confident that he could be a good 2 to 3 guy in the rotation, not sure about being the ace he was. And you're right there with me, Manlio. That's kind of what I just explained. It's hard for me not to buy in to Spencer Strider just because of my heart and how I feel about him and how I feel about Spencer Strider's heart and how I know he wants to be excellent and his drive to be the best. And it's hard for me to not see that and just be optimistic about what he can be. John Saunders says he needs to regain all his velocity and the movement on his fastball in order to be the dominant Strider once again. I agree, to be the dominant Strider, he needs that. I don't think he needs that to still be a really good pitcher. Bad News Barb says, I think he is a number 4 with a number 3 ceiling at best right now without top-end velocity. Matt H says he's the hardest working pitcher and knows how to use data to get back what he was. With a healthy offseason and what he learned this year, he's going to have his best year to date. So I love that optimism there from Matt. Calvin Fenner says, Strider's an intriguing one for me. He seemed to start out okay, but then seemed to tire and just be less effective as the season went on. We know he generates a lot from his lower half, and he made statements about his normal workout routine being off from the rehab. I think that's a good point too. And I said it when he was going through that rough stretch in August. He looked tired out there. He looked defeated, deflated, and all of that. And as I said, even in those good 6 starts to end the year, while the ERA was good, it still just wasn't. It didn't look right. Again, you can't fault the numbers, and maybe that's a big credit to him that even without that, he still was able to have success on the field. But I think you make a good point there, Calvin, about the fact that he just looked tired as the season went on. And they were giving him those extra days down the stretch too, which I think helped. Dustin Mount says, better fastball, but not 99 to 100, with him working on being more of a complete pitcher this season, more command over other pitchers, and to be close to a dominant pitcher again, hopefully number 2 style pitcher. So I do agree. What we saw from him this year, I think could help him in the future. So thank you so much for all of your comments there. Sorry I couldn't get to all of them, but I wanted to talk about a little bit of news. Dodgers advance. That's old news at this point. We'll see what happens with the Blue Jays and the Mariners on Sunday night, as I'm recording this on Sunday afternoon. Latest on the managerial searches, though, the Giants possibly closing in on Tony Vitello. That would be absolutely wild. I know some people talked about him for the Braves. I could not see that. We've never seen a manager go from, and I said this at the time, I didn't think there was, but now we've had other smarter people up there with research databases to confirm this. We've never had a guy go from manager of college ranks to the MLB ranks. I know it happens in other sports, but not in baseball. So it would be unprecedented. Tony's obviously done a fantastic job at Tennessee. I'm skeptical of how that's going to translate to the major league game, but we'll see. Albert Pujols seems to be getting a lot of interest from several teams now, including the Orioles. That just seems odd fit. Angels, obviously, that's been their guy, but they've also interviewed Kurt Suzuki and Torrey Hunter. Nick Punto is a name that's out there right now. The Twins have looked at Yankees hitting coach James Rosen and Red Sox bench coach Ramon Vasquez, as well as Royals third base coach Vance Wilson. Ryan Flaherty is considered a strong favorite for the Padres job, along with Nick Hundley in the mix. So that's kind of the latest on some of the managerial rumors. Still nothing for the Braves as they don't let anything get out. But I think it is noteworthy that we haven't seen George Lombard's name or really any of the other names that we expect the Braves to be going after, like a David Ross. We don't see them being mentioned to any other team. So I got to think that's somewhat of a plus for the Braves, especially if you want those guys. The Tigers are trying to lock down Skubal, who will be a free agent, I believe, after next year. But it's not going well. One report saying they're off about $250 million. So we could see Tarek Skubal possibly get traded. I already saw one report where the Mets are interested in trading for them. Of course, they would be. And of course, the Dodgers, they're still in the postseason. They haven't even won this World Series yet. And they're already the favorite for Kyle Tucker this offseason, which is just hilarious because, of course, they would be. Maybe more pertinent to the Braves and Cardinals. Looking to trade Sonny Gray this offseason. That's definitely going to be one that we talk about at some point. I know I've already had some listeners mention that as a possibility to me. And so we'll see if that's going to be a fit. I've never really been on the Sonny Gray train in the past, and that contract, they'd have to eat some money for me to feel even more comfortable with it. And I definitely wouldn't give up too much for him, but maybe it works out. But we'll talk more about that on a future episode. But that will do it for this episode of Locked On Braves. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube if you're new. Hit that thumbs up button. Leave me a comment down below. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast. And we will talk to you next time.